you're right. A lot of these ideas are really related to each other. The opposition to paranormal science, the government support of the Darwinian theory of evolution, the current political and economic systems are all tied together. And what will change it all is a new concept of the self, understanding we're all beings of pure consciousness. We have higher needs that are being completely neglected in terms of society in general. Of course, individually, people can find their own ways somehow or other, to satisfy their real needs and break out of the system and not get caught up in it. But it's very difficult because the whole thing is organized to force people into the system and keep them there. So part of so that's why there's this systematic opposition to paranormal science, cryptozoology, the idea of extraterrestrials. That's why there is such emphasis on keeping the materialistic theories of human origins intact in the education system, not allowing alternatives. It's all related, as you say.
Agreed. I am a staunch believer and of the idea that there is a reality that coexists with the one that's being fed to us, because there's just way too much evidence to suggest that it's not that way. It's interesting that you mentioned the possibility of an evolving consciousness, because it's kind of like a metaphorical new alternative energy device that we're searching for, as little energy input to produce a high amount of energy output. And that's really eloquently put by you in terms of a possible expanding consciousness. It's so nice to talk to somebody that thinks so far outside of the box, because at this point in history, I think it's a definite necessity in order to expand beyond the borders and limitations that have been put on us as a species. Because I also am a believer that we're capable of far greater things and are also part of something much bigger than they ever want you to really know about, because of the implications and losses of revenue and power, definitely. I guess a lot of this ties into your book, Human Devolution, a Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory. I don't think we have to go into too much of that because we kind of touched on a lot of it. I guess, Michael, you've done so much work in this world of forbidden archaeology, and you've extended yourself in so many different corners of the globe, through universities, media, radio, documentaries, and all of your books. What's on the horizon for Mr. Michael Cremo? Do you have another book in the works?
Well,
you kind of hinted at something there.
The reason I do all those things is because, I think we're in a time where things are starting to shake up a little bit. The foundations are starting to shift. I think we're in the midst of a renegotiation of our whole picture of reality, and I think there's a lot of different parties to that negotiation, and I try to communicate with all of them in as many ways as possible, which is why I'm all over the world. I'm on the web, I'm on TV, I'm on radio, I'm in newspapers, magazines, books, giving lectures to all kinds of groups. I don't want to limit myself to just communicating with one audience. I want to try to communicate with as many audiences as possible. So some of the upcoming events for me, well, in terms of lectures, I don't know when this show will air, but at the end of this month, April 30th, I'll be in Port Townsend, Washington, at the Truth Event, speaking there. There's truthevent.com, which is the website for that. So I've got other lectures coming up throughout the course of the year, and if people are interested in that, they could go to the schedule link on my website, mcremo.com, mcremo.com. As far as future books go, yes, I'm working on future books. I'm since I first put together the book Forbidden Archeology, a lot of new cases have come to my attention. So I've gathered a lot of material on that. I'm researching it, and eventually that will come out as a book. I'm also putting together a collection of all of the papers that I presented at mainstream scientific conferences on my forbidden archaeology work, my human devolution work, and other aspects of my work, because I think it's important that people have that as a reference. Because sometimes many people will say, well, these things aren't part of scientific discussion these days, but they actually are. There are some scientists who are willing to listen to these things, and they're the ones who have accepted the proposals I've made to present papers at major international conferences on archaeology, anthropology, history of science, and others. So I've got about 40 of those papers that I'm putting together in a book, and that'll be out hopefully by the end of the year. So, yes, there's an endless amount of work, not just for me, but for the whole community of researchers that are involved in alternative history, alternative science, alternative spirituality. There's a whole lot to be done. And I don't see myself as kind of a lone ranger. I see myself as part of a whole movement in alternative history, alternative science, alternative archaeology. Maybe we're not saying exactly the same things, but I think we're moving kind of in parallel in the same basic direction. And I think we're just like part of a whole wave that's out there in the general population. We're just floating on that wave, surfing on it, you could say. So that's what's in the future for me. I just want to ride this wave as long as I can.
Yeah, definitely. It's important work you're doing. Man, between you and Alejandro Rojas at Open Minds Magazine, and Leslie Kane with her book UFOs, and Suzanne Taylor in Los Angeles with her work in crop circles, it's a very brave and inspiring new world out there. And I want to thank you personally for all the hard work you're doing and for coming on the program to tell us all about it.
Well, thank you, Justin. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I'm just glad you came back after that first episode of missing that interview.
Well, like I said, those things happen, Justin. No problem.
I have to ask you one quick question before I go, though, because I'll be curious about it later and kind of kick myself. I heard about this artifact found. It must have been, I thought it was in the 50s. I'm probably wrong. In Asia, possibly somewhere in the Himalayas, something called the Dropa stones. Have you heard of?
I think that may be related to something found in Western China.
Okay.
As far as I know, like I said, my main focus is archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity, but I'm interested in all alternative archaeology topics, but I may not be so well informed about things that I haven't looked deeply into myself. And I think the Dropa stones are one of them. As far as I know, there is, among the researchers who've looked into them, a kind of extraterrestrial aspect to them, and that they were found in an area where there were UFO sightings, and according to some researchers, perhaps even some remnant population that had some kind of genetic input, from extraterrestrials. That's about all that I know, if my memory serves me correctly. It's not something I've looked deeply into myself. It's just something that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I know it's not a real direct connection to what we're talking about, but it is antiquity. I just saw a picture on your site, though, when I was reviewing some of your material over the last week, and it reminded me of the Dropastones. I wasn't sure if that was a photo of that or not. If they're like kind of
I'd have
spheroids.
To see the picture, but
yeah, some spheroids.
I haven't written anything about that myself, that particular topic, but it is an interesting one. It's something I'm aware of, but haven't really looked deeply into.
Very good. I don't want to take up any more of your time. You've been courteous enough to hang out with us here. This is Atlantic Canada's only paranormal radio broadcast, and you have been listening to Mr. Michael Cremo. His books include Forbidden Archeology-The Hidden History of Human Civilization. Did I get that right?
The Hidden History of the Human Race.
Right, and it incidentally has a foreword by Graham Hancock, who is quite...
Yeah, he was kind enough to do that.
Yeah, I thought that was awesome when I read about that. That's fantastic. Also, we've got your Human Devolution book, the Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory. There is Forbidden Archeology's Impact, and all kinds of groundbreaking work that you can research at www.mcremo.com. You can check out all that information there and pick up some of his books. It'll blow your mind if you haven't gotten into this stuff before. Thanks, Michael, for being with us tonight.
Okay, Justin. Bye.
You've been listening to The Unified Field. Be sure to tune in to the mothership CKDU for other fine programming. Check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk, YouTube, MySpace, Blueberry, and on Facebook. For questions, feedback, comments, show ideas, or anything else, contact us directly at unifiedfieldradio@gmail.com.
Unified Field Radio.